Chinese President Xi Jinping arriving in Malaysia's capital Kuala Lumpur for a 3-day state visit. It is the second stop of his Southeast Asian tour as he seeks to beef up regional cooperation in the wake of an escalating trade war with the United States. Mr. Xi said to discuss trade relations with the ASEAN chairman. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim had earlier promised a united response to Washington's wide-ranging levies that will have a significant impact on the 10-member ASEAN bloc. The Chinese leader is on a mission to win over allies. During his trip to Vietnam, Mr. Xi called on leaders to oppose what he called Washington's unilateral bullying. Both China and Vietnam also signing multiple agreements to deepen ties, including plans to bolster supply chains. And for more with Melissa Goh, live from Kuala Lumpur, and Olivia Siong, live from Hanoi. Melissa, let's start with you. Mr. Xi, President Xi of China, coming from Vietnam. Vietnam's tariffs, reciprocal tariffs, much higher than Malaysia's. Even so, Malaysia will be expecting something out of these talks. What does Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim hope to get out of any talks with China's president?
Well, the visit by Chinese President Xi Jinping is of great significance and importance to Malaysia. Now, his last visit to Malaysia was 12 years ago. So much so that Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, he was personally down on the tarmac at KL International Airport to welcome his arrival. There was also a colourful cultural performance that looked like a warrior dance that greeted President Xi before he entered his limo N701 that was waiting to ferry him to his hotel in Putrajaya, the government's administrative centre. Now, his official programme begins tomorrow with an audience with the king at the National Palace. Sultan Ibrahim, he'll be having an audience with him before bilateral meeting with Prime Minister Anwar at his official residence at Sri Perdana. Now, a host of agreements and MOUs are slated to be signed, witnessed by both President Xi and Prime Minister Anwar. Now, exactly what they are, we're still not sure at this point in time, but President Xi, in his op-ed and arrival statement, hopes to deepen traditional friendship that's millennium old with Malaysia and enhance political mutual trust, he said, and advance cooperation in modernization, while Mr. Anwar, who regarded President Xi as a trusted friend all this while, will hope to deepen trade and investment ties with China, ensure bigger access to its market for its durian and other produce. Now, China is Malaysia's largest trading partner for 16 consecutive years, and hopefully address some of the geo-economic challenges Malaysia is facing now and cushion the impact of U.S. tariffs. Now, if implemented, a full 24%, it's going to hurt. Now, digital and also green economy as well as renewable energy are some of the areas that both countries are exploring for enhanced cooperation, including tourism. Now, last year, there were nearly 6 million mutual visits between both countries. Now, this after Malaysia and China granted each other mutual visa exemption up to 1 month. Now, that number is set to soar.
Melissa, we'll return to those geo-economic challenges in a moment. But for now, let's cross to Olivia in Hanoi. Olivia, President Xi arriving in Malaysia from Vietnam, where we've heard a string of deals were signed. Malaysia and China, the relations there are very different historically from Vietnam and China. What did we see come out of President Xi's trip to Vietnam?
That's right, Wei Su. Actually, the framing of President Xi's trip, which is his first overseas trip of the year, the messaging from China has been that this is significant, not just bilaterally, for the countries that he's visiting, Vietnam, Malaysia, and then afterwards, later in the week, Cambodia. But they are also painting this as a significant trip for the region, for Southeast Asia. And here in Vietnam, President Xi had been very focused when talking with Vietnam officials about seeking, quote, practical cooperation. And we saw a slew of 45 cooperation agreements being signed, according to state media, including in areas like artificial intelligence, as well as trade of agricultural products. Vietnam's party chief, To Lim, talked about cooperation in science and technology being a bright spot between the two sides when it comes to cooperation as well. But where we are seeing more concrete details of cooperation by the two sides is when it comes to rail connectivity. We saw President Xi and the Vietnamese party chief watch the launch of the joint railway cooperation mechanism to speed up the preparation and implementation of several cross-border railway projects that have been in discussion for now, particularly one of the projects which runs from Lao Cai, which is Vietnam's border with China's Yunnan province. They are planning a railway from there all the way through the capital, Hanoi, to a nearby port in Haiphong. And according to a joint statement, both sides agreeing to implement a feasibility study to start construction soon and to accelerate the study of a plan to create a connection at the border between China and Vietnam. And we went down today to speak to travelers at the existing Hanoi railway station, and no doubt this is going to be a game changer for Hanoi. They said that the existing train system is good, but the expected upgrade could bring far more opportunities. Have a listen.
Kết nối của mình với Trung Quốc thì cảm thấy nó là để làm cho hàng hóa lưu thông mà con người ra gần nhau hơn.
Thì mình lựa chọn tàu bởi vì bây giờ nó đã là phương tiện mà mình ưu tiên hơn cả là việc đi xe khách rồi. Nó cũng khá là ok rồi. Cải thiện thì chắc là chỉ là các cái thiết bị cơ sở vật chất thì chắc là làm mới lên thôi.
Now, Vietnam's party chief during the meeting calling also for China to offer favorable terms for concessional loans, technology transfer, as well as human resources training. Now, this railway is expected to cost $8 billion. Vietnam already getting approval to partially fund this through China loans. But analysts I've been speaking to say that this will certainly be significant, not just helping to boost trade and the flow of people and goods between the two countries. That's going to be significant, but it's also going to be significant given the structure of this project politically for both sides as well.
Olivia, on the political angle, Mr. Xi in Hanoi urging leaders there to oppose what he called Washington's unilateral bullying. Of course, Vietnam, now Malaysia, he heads next to Cambodia. His mission driving this current Southeast Asian trip will be driving him as he moves from Vietnam to Malaysia and then to Cambodia.
Wei Su, there is a lot of motivation and a lot riding on this Southeast Asia tour that President Xi is on, because you have to remember that the U.S. has slapped 145% duties on Chinese goods into the country. And we have seen throughout this trip, even though we have to note that there was no explicit mention of the U.S. or of the Trump administration or of these specific tariffs that are now sweeping trading partners, but we do have to remember that China exported $450 billion in goods to the U.S. last year, and economists are already downgrading their growth forecast for China. And so President Xi is going out on this charm offensive in search of alternative markets so as to ensure its economic growth. Also, remember that Vietnam is negotiating with the U.S. for some reprieve on its 46% duties that it has on Vietnamese exports into the U.S. So China also keen to make sure that its interests aren't going to be compromised in the midst of all these negotiations going on. In a joint statement issued by both sides, they agreed to uphold multilateralism given in the face of uncertainty, instability in the international situation. Also, both sides notably agreeing to, quote, jointly oppose hegemony and power politics, as well as oppose unilateralism in all forms. Now, the Vietnamese side also saying that it supported China's ascension to the trade pact, the CPTPP, given that the necessary requirements and procedures could be met. But all this in light of the ongoing escalating trade war between China and the U.S., a lot riding on President Xi's trip moving forward too. Wei Su.
Oh, thanks, Olivia. Melissa, back to you in Kuala Lumpur. We heard, Olivia, that Vietnam negotiating with Washington on its own because it faces those very high tariffs, even higher than Malaysia would face if those reciprocal tariffs were to go into effect after this 90-day, so-called less than 90-day pause at this point. But of course, ASEAN, Malaysia as ASEAN chair, is also calling for a coordinated response for the entire bloc across 10 members to answer Washington's threatened tariffs on this region. Could Mr. Xi's visit to 3 of these ASEAN countries affect how ASEAN coordinates its response to those threatened terrorists from Washington?
Indeed, when President Xi holds talks with Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim on Wednesday, he will also be speaking with him as the chair of ASEAN, the 10-member Southeast Asian grouping. Now, their economic ministers, remember, has jointly agreed last week to engage with the U.S. in a frank and constructive dialogue and not to take any retaliatory actions that will escalate further trade tensions. Now, President Xi would want to impress upon Anwar and ASEAN partners that China is a reliable partner whom they can trust in upholding multilateral rules-based trading system, standing in solidarity with ASEAN against the protectionism and unilateralism unleashed by U.S. Trump administration. But as Mr. Anwar has admitted as well last week, that it's going to be increasingly difficult, a major challenge, he said, for ASEAN to showcase its centrality. As President Xi is undertaking a 3-country Southeast Asian tour to win greater influence in the region in this charm offensive, so to speak. But ASEAN must be steadfast, he said, to stay non-aligned. Malaysia and ASEAN must remain open for business, including everyone, including US and China, as Malaysia trade delegation is also trying to seek an appointment with Trump administration to begin negotiation in Washington end of this month before this 90-day pause expires.
Thanks. Melissa Goh there in Kuala Lumpur, where President Xi, China's president, is right now, and Olivia Siong in Hanoi. President Xi, of course, departing Vietnam today for Malaysia.